Frantic crying reverberated down the corridor of the hospital. Before anyone was even able to see what was happening, a heavily pregnant woman stumbled backward, one hand clutching her belly as she gasped for air. Another woman, dressed in a striking royal blue gown, had her by the hair, screaming with pure fury. The nurses stood in dumb amazement. A few patients watched with pale faces from their wheelchairs. For 1 second, it seemed like time had just stopped and was going no further. The woman in the hospital gown wasn't just another patient. She was going to give birth any moment. And attacking her, the woman with a fit of rage in her eyes wasn't just any other woman, but her husband's mistress. A woman who had waited too long to take revenge for the love that would never wholly belong to her. But what the mistress didn't know was that this gentle, heartbroken woman that she was hurting, this quiet soul, about to collapse, had a father whose very name could silence an entire city. If you still believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can still change the world, like, comment, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories, because it's through stories like these that we remember the greatest strength often hides behind the softest heart. Her name was Sienna Hall, 28 years old, kind, modest, and once full of dreams of living happily ever after with her husband Jordan. They met years ago when love was pure and life was simple, before ambition and greed transformed him into something she could hardly recognize. Sienna came from humble beginnings. She had grown up with only her mother after her father Arthur disappeared when she was just a child, or so she had thought. Her mother would say that he was just a man who couldn't handle his responsibilities. That story had shaped Sienna's entire life. It taught her to rely on no one, to love quietly, and to forgive too easily. When she met Jordan, she thought she had finally found the one person who would protect her heart. But as her belly grew and her emotions became fragile, Jordan began to change. His late-night calls lengthened, his excuses weakened, and there was perfume on his collar that didn't belong to her. Then one day, the truth blew her world apart. Jordan was having an affair with Mara Steele, a glamorous executive who commanded the attention of every room she walked into. Mara had everything Sienna didn't have: money, charisma, influence, and the arrogance of a person who really thought power could buy anything, even love. When Sienna confronted her husband, he did not even deny it. He looked her right in her eyes and said coldly, "Mara understands me better." And then he walked out, leaving his pregnant wife standing in the doorway, broken and alone. Weeks had gone by, and the stress was beginning to take its toll. Sienna started developing complications, and her doctor had warned her to rest. So, she checked herself into a private hospital, hoping for peace. Unbeknownst to her, Mara had found out and was on her way to destroy what little calm she had left. That afternoon, with the sun streaking through the glass entrance of the hospital, Sienna sat quietly, waiting for her medication. Her back was in pain and her contractions irregular, but she was very strong. She whispered softly to her unborn baby, promising safety, love, and a better life. But in an instant, that fragile peace was shattered. A sharp click of high heels echoed down the hall, and Mara stormed in, her eyes blazing with jealousy. She pounced on Sienna without uttering a word, tugging at her hair and screaming venomously. "You think you can keep him with that baby?" she hollered, shaking her violently. Sienna was crying in pain, nurses running up to them. But before anyone could intervene, a commanding voice cut through the chaos. Deep and cold and full of authority. Enough. The air shifted, and everyone froze. Out of the crowd stepped a tall, silver-haired man in a dark overcoat, his presence magnetic, his voice calm yet thunderous. The nurses fell silent, not out of fear, but out of respect, because the man standing there was Arthur Vaughan, one of the most powerful businessmen in the entire city, and the woman being attacked was his daughter. The air shifted instantly. The nurses stood frozen, not from fear, but from respect, because they all recognized the man who had just spoken. Arthur Vaughan, a name that carried weight throughout the entire city, a man whose one word could make or break empires. But to Sienna, that name meant nothing. She didn't recognize him. Not yet. Arthur's eyes softened the instant they met hers, the same innocent, tear-filled eyes, just like her mother's all those years ago. And in that instant, his heart shattered. He had spent decades searching for the daughter he'd lost after a bitter divorce, years drowning in regret, replaying the moment he walked away. And here she was now, pregnant, terrified, and being attacked. His daughter, the child he had failed to protect. He stepped closer, reaching for Sienna's trembling hand as the hospital staff pulled Mara away. His voice, when it came, was calm, but carried the weight of thunder. "No one," he said, and his eyes never left Mara's face, "touches my family again." The words hit like a verdict. Mara froze, still oblivious to whom she had just crossed. A cold, bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Your family? This pathetic woman?" But then she noticed something. The hospital director had bowed his head. The security guards had stepped aside, Even the nurses were standing at attention. And just like that, her confidence began to crumble. Arthur nodded to his assistant, who called quietly. In a few minutes, reporters and cameras were outside the hospital. The police did not have much to do when they arrived. Mara was in handcuffs by then, her career and reputation already unraveling before her eyes. In came Jordan, pale-faced and with a trembling voice, riddled with excuses and panic. Arthur didn't even look in his direction. He walked right up to Sienna. He laid a gentle hand on her shoulder and in a soft voice, spoke with quiet power. "You're safe now." Sienna looked up, her eyes shining with tears. She didn't understand who this man was, but something in his tone made her feel safe, protected for the first time in a long while. When the doctor came to whisk her away to the delivery room, Arthur leaned over and whispered, "I'll be right here, sweetheart, I promise." That night, as rain tapped gently against the windows and the city lights were blurring in the glass, Sienna gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She cuddled him close to her heart, the tears streaming down her face this time, not because of pain, but because of peace. Arthur entered quietly, watching from the doorway. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at the miracle before him, his daughter, and his grandson. Finally, Sienna looked up, her voice trembling. "Who are you?" Arthur's expression softened. He stepped closer to them and said quietly, "Someone who should have never left. Someone who's proud of you, Sienna." It took her a second, but then, as she looked into his familiar eyes, realization dawned. Her breath caught in her throat, and the tears she'd been holding back finally fell. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone anymore. The story eventually spread to every news outlet weeks later. Mara Steele was blacklisted from every major company in the city after assaulting the daughter of Arthur Vaughan, the glamorous executive. Her empire collapsed overnight. As for Jordan, his fall was swift. Reputation shattered, career gone. The price of betrayal finally paid in full. But Sienna, she wasn't after revenge. She found so much more. Arthur gave her and her baby a new beginning, not with wealth, but with love. He put them in a peaceful home surrounded by gardens, warmth, and laughter. And every night as Sienna watched her baby boy sleep, she would whisper softly, "You are loved, you are safe, and you will never know the pain I did." If this story has touched your heart, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Story. These stories remind us that compassion still wins, even in a world that often forgets. Before you go, tell us in the comments, do you believe forgiveness truly heals even the deepest wound? Because in the end, what saved Sienna wasn't revenge, or power, or money. It was love finally finding its way home.